because the beginning of the end felt like, okay, well, now I just kind of trail off. Is that next? And that feeds all the things that we were talking about. Brooke, that feels all the things we were talking about in terms of, well, I'm done. I'm finished. They're not going to need me. They're not going to want me. Well, actually, no, that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
And what midlife is the beginning of in terms of life after kids, it's actually the beginning of parenting adult children.
Mm-hmm.
And that is tricky. Very, very tricky. And so rather than kind of brush your hands and say, okay, I'm done with that, it's like, how am I going to do this now?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that just by itself makes everything more relational, because it's not like I've done my job. It's like I've done that part of my job. Now, what does this part look like?
Mm-hmm.
And it feels fuller to me than empty.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Life After Kids with Doctors Brooke and Lynne. I'm Dr. Brooke.
And I'm Dr. Lynne.
Ladies, thank you so much for joining us again today. We have an absolute fabulous guest joining us, and I cannot wait to introduce her. Dr. Lynne and I are sort of fangirling over her a little bit. Before we do that, I just want to give you all a quick reminder that the Life After Kids book is out and available for pre-order now. It ships in September, so don't wait to order it, because once September comes and it ships, you won't be able to access those free author bonuses. You can get the book at lifeafterkids.com/book. And we're so excited for all of you to read it. Let's get on to the most important thing, which is our guest. Today we have author and podcast host Suzanne Stabile. And most of you probably know her because I know you've read some of her books, at least The Road Back to You, but she's also the author of The Path Between Us, an Enneagram Journey to Healthy Relationships, and the book Journey Towards Wholeness. And then she's got a fourth that she's working on here too. Suzanne is also the host of the popular podcast, The Enneagram Journey. She is an Enneagram master teacher and known as the Enneagram Godmother. And she's been a student of the Enneagram for more than 35 years. Suzanne, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to talk with you today.
Oh, this is really a true highlight. As you said, Brooke, so well earlier before you came on, Suzanne, is like this book has impacted so many people, and you really, I think, are one of the foremost authorities for something that really there is no direct authority, right? With the Enneagram, it's been around for thousands of years, centuries, but to pull from it that understanding, it's so helpful to have a guide, and you're such a powerhouse guide. So thank you so much for being here. And today we're going to really dive into how this Enneagram, this tool that we have available to us, can help women in midlife, and especially in this empty nest season, rediscover themselves, find themselves perhaps for the first time, that authentic voice that we all know is inside, right? And by doing so, then living with more purpose. It isn't just to find that for selfish reasons. It's to find that to give back to the world in a meaningful way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot, isn't it?
I know. There was no question there. I was just like, I'm coming with those. But thoughts on this stage of life and what it means to dive into self-awareness after raising your kids?
Well, I think I would like to start with some basic Enneagram wisdom that's not often taught, and it's missing, frankly, in a lot of Enneagram available information. And that is that your Enneagram number is determined by your motivation for your behavior, not by your behavior. And behavior changes, but motivation never changes. So too often when we're trying to grow through something or understand ourselves in a different stage of life, too often what we're trying to do is address and change behavior patterns. And that is, sometimes successful, oftentimes not. And I'm now convinced that part of the reason for that is without understanding why you do what you do, it's very difficult to make any changes that are systemic or sustainable that have to do with what you do.
Hmm. That's so
So,
good.
well, I'll just give you an example. I'm a 2 on the Enneagram, and my motivation for everything I do is that I want to be wanted and I want people to love me in all the ways that love is a word that you can use 1,000 different ways. And so whatever I do, that's behind it. Ones on the Enneagram want to believe that they're good, and they don't believe that they are. And so whatever they do is colored by, I just want to be a good human being, a good mom. I'm trying to be a good wife, a good human, a good all podcaster, a good all the things. And people don't walk around and tell you that you're good. They don't tell you that you're wanted. In our culture, like for threes, what they want is to believe that they're loved for who they are and not for what they do.
Mm.
But if you don't know that, and if you don't know that that's the motivation, then threes focus on being successful ends up coloring everything as opposed to not being able to address wanting to be successful without it having to be a measurable success for the moment. And it goes through all the numbers, of course.
Yeah, I love that you're diving into that because that was one of the things I was hoping we would get into today. Is just like, how does that affect each number? Thinking of yourself, you have kids, you have grandkids, and the women that might be listening with the different Enneagram types. Like, how does empty nesting look differently for, you don't just explain that for 1, 2, 3, but like say a 7, or go through, if you wouldn't mind, spend a few moments with, because you're such an expert on each number, 4s, 5s, 6, 7, 8s, 9s.
Sure. So 4s are the most complex number on the Enneagram.
Mm.
And honestly, 4 children are a challenge to raise. And it's a unique position for a child to be the child of a 4 parent because of the complexity of 4ness. And what 4s want is to be understood, but they accurately believe that you can be seen and heard and understood with somebody getting to know you. Unfortunately, the pace of our culture means that people aren't going to take the time to get to know you. So you're going to have to present with something, and anything that 4s present with brevity feels inauthentic to them.
Hmm.
And their thing they hold on to is to be authentic. Whatever else I am, I'm going to be authentic.
Mm.
5s are the number on the Enneagram, interestingly enough, that has a measured amount of energy. And that means that 5s wake up every morning with the same amount of energy, and every encounter takes part of that energy away. So it's a measuring, an intuitive measuring all day, every day of how much energy have I lost and how much do I have left.
Hmm.
So
Those are clues to your number too, right? What you spoke about earlier is the main clue is your motivation, right? To
right,
start there. So I know it's
that's right.
really confusing sometimes for people just starting with the Enneagram to find their typing.
Yeah.
And one of the things Dr. Brooke and I always tell our clients or the women listening is the best answer comes from you and some work in this and learning, but start with your motivation, but then also look at keys, because with the 5s, it's definitely energy related, right? And if that's something, is that solid
Yes.
advice?
Yes, that's very solid advice. And there's no space culturally for one mom to have significantly less energy than another.
Mm.
So the number on the Enneagram that has the most energy is 8s. 9s have the least energy, but 5s have a measured amount of energy. And the difference is in part that fives lose energy through touching, through talking, all of the things that are involved in raising children. So without somebody saying it's understandable that you don't want to have a child in your lap all the time, that you don't want to be the team mom for every sport for every kid, that it's a matter of that you cannot do that even adequately because you don't have the energy to do that. So if we could just get beyond the fact that there is a certain way to be a mom, because there's not, and there's not a certain way to approach your days either, because your Enneagram number is based on how you see. And there are 9 different ways of seeing. And you can change what you do with how you see, but you can never change how you see.
I see. Mm.
So an example I would give you about fives is I was working with some adoptive parents, and several were single women who were fives on the Enneagram.
Wow.
And they also had adopted children, some of whom had attachment disorders, which meant for a 5 mom that the prescription is lots of touching, which is breathtaking if you're a 5 on the Enneagram, and that's what you need to do to care for your child.
Wow.
So I couldn't figure out. They kept asking me, "What do we do? What do we do?" And I thought, I don't know yet. But my mom was a 5 on the Enneagram, and I was adopted. So what I thought about was how did she deal with that in my memory? And she had very creative ways. So I'll give you one example. I always had long hair, and she would sit me on the floor in front of her and brush my hair for a long time. And then she'd braid it, and then she would unbraid it. And then she'd put it in pigtails, and then she'd take it down. And then she'd put it in pigtails and braid the pigtails. So what happened was I got all of that touching and all of that attention and all of that conversation, but we were both facing the same direction. So she was giving through that, but I wasn't taking by touching and grabbing and holding and all the things.
Wow. That's so beautiful.
Sixes, this is deep Enneagram work, and so I'm not going to go far, but every Enneagram number is associated with a passion, which in traditional Enneagram language is referred to as a sin, but I don't use that language for 1,000 reasons, and we don't need to go into them, except that I think passion works just as well. But the passion / sin, if that language is easier to understand in relationship to passions, for sixes is fear. But it's better defined as anxiety, because sixes are worried about possible future events. So the reality then is sixes who are moms are worried about their children and how the day's going to go, and they prepare them for everything that could go wrong. And lots of children find that to be off-putting, and a lot of children pick it up, and it is problematic in that sense. So what sixes want is to feel safe. So as moms, of course, what they want is for their children to be safe. All of the motivation is pure. It's not unhealthy, nor is it impure in any way. It's just unique to each of the 9 personality types. And I'm 75. I have 4 children and 9 grandchildren. And I would not want to be parenting and believe that I couldn't keep my child safe. And I wouldn't want to have to figure out what to do with all the anxiety that is now surrounding us. The way I talk about that is that I think anger and anxiety are free falling on all of us all the time. So they've become our 2 responses to many, many things. And I think it would be very challenging to try to find a way to deal with my anxiety about my own parenting and about the worlds that my children enter when they go to school or go to camp or all the things that happen. I also think there are more sixes than any other number on the Enneagram. I don't have a percentage for
It's very
that, but
common, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
I think it is. And so I think advertising plays to that then.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of talk about what it means to be a good parent. And my response to that in part is, well, it depends on your number and your child's Enneagram number, but you could do on your personality and your child's personality. And understanding that is the path to communication, as I understand it.
Hmm.
And I think we miscommunicate with our children and with other people, not intentionally, but because of difference in how we receive and process information from the environment.
Yeah. So just on that point, for someone who's just beginning in this work, whether it's Enneagram or learning about themselves through another way, that is the most important thing to know, I think, as far as how far reaching this work can be in your life, because unless you know who you are and how you're wired and how uniquely you are crafted, right, in his vision, I think that you go through life projecting the way you do things, the way you see things, the way you behave on everybody, because you don't see it as special enough, right, or as special. And once you find that out about yourself, and the Enneagram is just one tool, but it's a fantastic one.
Agreed.
It's a beginning of that unraveling to where you can really free. Some people resist it, would you say, right? Because I don't want to be put in a box. I don't want to be labeled. Well, it's a way actually, and I think I'm quoting yourself or Ian on this. It's a way to take you out of the box and actually see yourself for the full potential of who you are. So it's so very freeing. And I think to your point, it's then you can become capable of seeing your child for all that they are, right? Once you see and give yourself that gift, because you can only love another to the extent that you love yourself, really, or the capacity for that. And so it really can be so healing for your relationships with your children, because they are not an extension of you. They're not an exact replica. They're their own living, breathing person with all of these cool nooks and crannies. And, really, really just so amazing.
I think if you don't know yourself, well, first of all, that is essentially my response about boxes. But my response is that I don't put you in a box. I show you the box that you're already in and try to help you get out of it. Because the Enneagram is always expansive and it's always helpful. And so if those two things aren't present, then it's not true Enneagram wisdom. And in understanding difference, you can negotiate relationships better than assuming sameness, because that means one of you has to be right and one of you has to be wrong. And in the intrigue that comes with being able to consider that we can look at the same thing and be having the same experience and be having a completely different experience at the same time is by itself a way to begin a level of communication that doesn't stop giving. I learned the Enneagram when our oldest was 17. Well, I started talking about it when she was 17. I learned it before that, but I didn't talk about it for a number of years. And we would all tell you that it's changed how we have lived as a family and continue to do that. Our children all went away to school and they all came back to the Dallas area. So we're all here. And my children are all 4 different numbers, but they've learned to accommodate the difference. In some of those relationships, accommodating the difference is a big accommodation, and some not so big. And they are really good aunts and uncles to their nieces and nephews. Like, and all of it, Enneagram talk is part of our life because we've known it for so long.
Mm.
I know that's not true for everyone, but what I'm trying to say by sharing that is that it doesn't get old and it doesn't wear out. And in terms of Enneagram wisdom, once you hear it, you can never not see it again. Doing the sevens, you want me to do 7, 8,
Yes,
9
I was
before we
gonna say,
go?
I took you off track. Let's go back to seven.
That's okay. I like it when somebody else takes me off track instead of when I take myself off track. Sevens are, in so many ways, the most creative, the most optimistic of all the numbers. And as children, they are a delight to watch as long as you don't have to parent them. Parenting sevens is almost as hard as parenting fours. One of the things I would say now, because I don't want to forget it, is fours and sevens as children look exactly alike. And I don't think you should assign numbers to your children anyway. So that's a whole different subject. I'm glad today I get to talk about moms. I think the reality in dealing with sevens is understanding, if you're a seven mom, that you reframe everything. And you usually reframe it into a positive. And sometimes that's not helpful when you're parenting. And your ability to reframe things is intuitive, and you've done it since you were a child. So you don't enter a day without that on board, that whatever happens is going to be reframed. And that means that you miss some things. But what sevens want, in underneath all of that good, fun stuff, is they want to believe that they're going to be taken care of. And I'm not sure that moms in midlife can figure out how they're going to be cared for. By the culture, by the people around them, in relation to their children. I think there's just a point where they can't. That's very complicated. So if that's what you're looking for, then you're going to have to look inside for that. And you're going to have to look inside from a place of a full range of emotions and not just the happy half range of emotions, which is also true to sevenness.
So I want to make sure we speak about, for those listening, when you mentioned you didn't want to get into it, but don't assign numbers to your children. And I just want to clarify that obviously means, or to me, it would mean let that be self-directed. Do not let the child figure that out on their own journey. Maybe give them some resources or point them in the direction to get that help to find that number. But is that the essence of why you would say that, Suzanne?
Yes. And it's interesting because I used to do, people would invite me to come teach the Enneagram to parents. And I was not usually exactly what they were looking for, because what they wanted was for me to help them figure out what numbers their children are. And I'm not a fan of that. On the other hand, our daughter Joey and her husband Billy have Enneagram parents. You can Google that and find out what they have to say about parenting, and it's all very, very, very good. And their sense is that you can tell what stance your children are in, even if you don't know their numbers, and that's enough for good parenting. And I think their work is very good.
Talk about that for some people who are getting deeper. I hear you refer to stance a lot. What is that? What's the definition of that? What does that exactly mean? And what can we learn from our stance?
Okay, that has a long lead in. So here it comes.
We still have to go back to the eights. We won't forget that. We'll come back.
Will. Eights and nines. We'll go back.
And
all right.
Yes.
So in the Enneagram, there are lots of groups of 3. And essentially, the modern grandfather of the Enneagram was George Gurdjieff, and he did some very important work in terms of reviving the symbol and some of the awareness of Enneagram wisdom globally. Following that, or at the same time, in the late 1940s, when that was happening, there was a guy whose name is Maurice Nicole, and he lived in England, was an Englishman, and he wrote what was then called a white paper. It now would just be a study and he said there are only 3 centers of intelligence, and nobody disagreed with that. And the 3 centers are thinking, feeling, and doing. And if you put Maurice Nicole's work on top of the Enneagram, then what's discovered is that 2s, 3s, and 4s take in information from the environment first with what do I feel. 5, 6s, and 7s take in information first with what do I think. And 8s, 9s, and 1s with what am I going to do. The other 2 centers then find place in all of that. So one of the other centers supports the dominant center, which I just gave to you. But at the same time, Karen Horney was doing a lot of work, and she said that all people either move toward other people, away from other people, or against other people. If you put Karen Horney's work on top of Maurice Nicole's work on top of the Enneagram, then in each of those sets of 3, there was one number that moved toward, one number that moved away from, and one number that moved against.
Interesting. Okay, so each Enneagram number would have one counterpart.
One dominant.
Got it.
One supports the dominant,
Yep.
and one repressed center. Repressed being the one you use least and last. Stances are determined by which number is repressed, as opposed to triads, which are determined by which number is dominant.
Okay. I think I understand that a little better. Thank you for going into that.
Sure. Yeah. And the important thing about that is obviously the goal would be to use each of the 3 centers for its purpose, right? And in order to do that, we all have to do the work of bringing up our repressed center, which a lot of work has been done around this. I think Dr. David Daniels' work is exquisite, but there was a lot of other work done around it too. And your repressed center, or the one you use least and last, you haven't used much since you were between the ages of 8 and 12.
Wow.
So children used to lead with one of the 3 centers. It didn't work for them, so they started using the other 2. So 3s, 7s, and 8s use feelings least and last. 4s, 5s, and 9s use doing least and last. And 1s, 2s, and 6s use thinking least and last. So if you, as a mom, use feeling least and last, and you're parenting a child who's feeling dominant, then you need to do some bridge building there. And that, of course, would play out in all the numbers.
And work on your own repressed center too, from your own standpoint. And then that's going to.
Yeah, that's all. That's all you can do.
Yeah.
Right? Is work on yourself.
Very interesting. Love that. Okay. So back to, I think we left off on 8s. Our many 8s that are listening.
8s are the most aggressive number on the Enneagram. They think fastest of all the numbers on the Enneagram. Based on what we just discussed, they use feelings least and last. And they have the most energy of all the numbers on the Enneagram. So being an 8 mom is initially challenged by how you have to slow down for children. And being an 8 mom means that you have to learn to recognize when your aggression is problematic as a mom, no matter where you are, not just with your child, but at the school or at the grocery store or all the places. I think 8s are I know 8s are the most concerned that people are going to betray them. And there is that's kind of always there. And then there's a letting go of children into the hands of other adults, into the world, into all the things. And if you think people are going to betray you and you haven't done a lot of Enneagram work, then you think people are going to betray your children as well, and or betray you in relationship to your children. So that gets to be its own thing. And nines are just easygoing peacemakers. And their gift and their problem, and that's true of every number. In every number, your gift is your problem. So the best part of you is also the worst part of you. And for nines, the best part of them is that they see at least two sides to everything. And the worst part is that they see at least two sides to everything.
Mm.
And what nines want is to believe that their presence matters, and they generally don't believe that. So a nine mom in midlife, when children are starting to move on, would believe that her presence just isn't going to matter anymore, that she's given what she had to give and done what she had to do, but now she's going to become irrelevant in some way, which is not true. But the stories that we all tell ourselves as moms in midlife are not true.
And harsh very often.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
I never saw that perspective with a nine, because we talk a lot and think through like what, based on your Enneagram type, how you would be feeling as your parents, as your children get older and leave home. I never thought of, it's easy for me to see as a 2 being that caretaker type, and now your child's leaving, how that plays out. That's an obvious thing, at least to me. But with a 9 and that perspective you just gave, because we do use the word and it hits home for a lot of moms when we say you feel irrelevant in this phase of life. And I didn't until you just spoke that, made the connection that with a 9, that's going to be, you're going to feel that even more.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
Did you have another question, Brooke, about 6s? I think she was talking about 6s, and
it was more an observation. I wish everything that you're speaking, Suzanne, I'm just wrapping my brain and processing it through, like, what does that look like for A, as a woman in midlife, heading into a new chapter, and then B, as a mom, as your kids are also heading into a new chapter. So I was just thinking through, as you spoke about a 6 being fearful and then wanting to keep their kids safe, how I could see that as a mom of grown kids, you could be the mom that's still helicoptering and trying to fix everything, and you could this is going to sound harsh, but maybe become an annoyance in some ways to them, or feel like annoyance, because you could be maybe overbearing. And I think that's where you say the first thing you need to understand is your motivation, not your action. Because when you understand that what your motivation is to keep them safe, now you can take steps to sort of not cause issues in your relationship with them, or the way you parent them.
Yep, I agree with all that. And I think people ask me at events, so what number should be married to what number, or partnered with what number? And the answer always is, it doesn't matter if you're working on being healthy. And if you're working on yourself, the same is true in parenting, regardless of what stage of life you're in, because being healthy and that having that as a goal, that should always be. And the healthier you are, the better parent you're going to be, and the better woman you're going to be.
Right.
So we always talk about step 0 is self-awareness, right? Because when you know better, you do better. But then that has to move from the theory to the practical, and into the steps that women can take to actually now learn what they've learned, take that, and not to modify their behavior, but to enhance what they are already doing and move towards that healthier version of themselves. What are some tools or practical tips? What are some concrete steps that you would advise a woman to take once they know this information, how to walk that path?
Well, the most helpful, I think, to me was that my husband, Joe, and I started talking when our children started leaving home about first half of life and second half of life.
Mm.
And not only were they leaving home, which was a big transition, but also we were aging. And yet we had a lot of energy. We both have always had that. Joe's 78 and I'm 75, and we're both working full time. Like we were not comfortable with midlife being the beginning of the end of life because that didn't fit us. So we changed our perspective so that we started talking about the second third and the third third.
Hmm.
And once we labeled where we were as our children were, and our children, the four are a 10-year range. Once we were able to say, we're in the middle of this, we're not at the end of one part and the beginning of the last part. We're in the middle, and we still have 1 foot over here and 1 foot over here. And midlife then became the middle of the whole, but the whole is 3 parts instead of 2. And I know that isn't common language yet. I've never said it to a couple, a woman, a man in midlife, that it wasn't helpful.
Hmm.
Because the beginning of the end felt like, okay, well, now I just kind of trail off. Is that next? And that feeds all the things that we were talking about. Brooke, that feels all the things we were talking about in terms of, well, I'm done. I'm finished. They're not going to need me. They're not going to want me. Well, actually, no, that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
And what midlife is the beginning of in terms of life after kids, it's actually the beginning of parenting adult children.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
And that is tricky. Very, very tricky. And so rather than kind of brush your hands and say, okay, I'm done with that, it's like, how am I going to do this now?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that just by itself makes everything more relational. Because it's not like I've done my job. It's like I've done that part of my job. Now,
Mm-hmm.
what does this part look like?
Mm-hmm.
And it feels fuller to me than empty.
That, I hope I'm not cutting you off. I just have to say that just blew my mind a little bit because I'm grappling, and I still have one at home in high school. The other 2 are out at college, but I think I'm grappling just as much, if not more, with my kids leaving home and that sort of phase of my life being over as I am with seeing them getting older and knowing that I'm getting older too. And really feeling a sense of like it's the beginning of the end and just wanting to look so far out instead of looking right where I am. So when you put it in those terms, I think it's beautiful to say the 3 phases, because then really when you're entering this phase, you're at the beginning of a new chapter. You're not at the beginning of the end.
Right.
And for anyone that's a 9 that's feeling irrelevant, well, you certainly aren't irrelevant because you're probably going to have to step up your parenting now, because parenting older kids is going to be a lot harder.
Correct.
in many ways, right? So it
and a lot more rewarding. I'm sorry
Sure.
to cut you off. A
No,
lot harder
please.
and a lot more rewarding, though.
More juice to squeeze, right? There's out of life, and that's a part of that reframing and just pivoting it. Like you said, that was so beautiful. Like it's a way to embrace it where it's okay. Now we have this possibility, and instead of thinking, oh, the alternative, like you said, the beginning to the end.
And you both know that doctor's not in front of my name, so I'm going to put that on the table. But one of the things I would say is when you still have 1 at home and you have 2 in college, if you don't look at it as the second, third, the 1 at home then has you at the beginning of the end.
Oh,
Instead of, yeah, it is, I think. And it, I think it's very hopeful language, I guess.
Yes,
it is.
I love that word to describe that. that hopeful reframing. I love it. It's interesting to me because I've also heard you talk a lot about orientation to time, in time. And are there types that are more with strengths and Clifton strengths? I'm not sure, that's something that is a passion of mine, and helping women as well with self-awareness. We talk about that with certain strengths that keep you out in the future or keep you in the past. With Enneagram, are there certain types that are have a tendency to that different orientation in time? And can you speak to that?
Sure. Orientation of time is part of stance work. So 1s, 2s, and 6s orientation to time is the present moment. 4s, 5s, and 9s orientation to time is the past. And 3s, 7s, and 8s orientation to time is the future.
That's really important, I think, to know about yourself, because again, that comparison tool, and you're comparing yourself to other moms that are going through the empty nesting or feeling different feelings. It's really important to know that it's okay, and that orientation to time has something to say about how you're going to navigate this space. Yeah,
that's right. And I think it's real important to recognize. I used to work with couples because I had time. I used to do Enneagram work with couples, and I haven't done that for 20 years. But when I did, orientation to time was more often a problem than number difference.
The differences between the husband and the wife.
Right. And so children whose orientation of time is the future, and I didn't know the Enneagram when my future oriented children were small, but the thing that they responded poorly to and that they hated the most was me talking about my feelings in the present moment and their behavior in the past. Because they're only looking at the future. And if I had known then what I know now, then I could have talked to them about behavior and how it affects the future, their future. And it's a disconnect. All the things that maybe one of the most valuable pieces of Enneagram wisdom is that it makes connections where there are disconnections, not where necessarily just where connections are lacking, but where there's a disconnect, because it explains it and then it shows you how you can do something about it. And, I think all of the things and all of the tools that help us know ourselves better are great. And I think the Enneagram's best because you can do something with it. I'm an ENFJ on Myers-Briggs, and that's lovely, and I can do a little bit with that, but not much. The fact that I'm a 2 on the Enneagram means I have lifelong work that I can do to be a healthier, better human being. Because if the Enneagram shows you exactly where you lost your way and exactly how to get it back. And I think you can just go to that spot and keep getting incrementally better by being healthier and more aware of your own gifts and the gifts that other people have that you don't have.
I real quick, sorry, Lynne, to cut you off, but you mentioned it provides connection. The Enneagram can provide connection where there's a disconnect. And I think I just want to point out, I think that's easy for us to see when it comes to our relationships. But I think it's really important to remember that, especially in this phase of life, we can feel and become disconnected to ourselves.
That's right.
And from that perspective, that's probably the most important connection, in my opinion, other than with God, that you can have. And so to have that tool to form a connection with yourself where you're feeling disconnected is huge.
I think that's true too. And I in the progression of my 3 books, from The Road Back to You is about you, The Path Between Us is about you in relationship with other people, and The Journey Toward Wholeness is about you in relationship to God. And The Journey Toward Wholeness is the book that uses stance work and explains that and gives all the steps that go with that. And I believe that as we're growing older, we have the potential to be growing wiser, only though if we're continuing to do meaningful work on ourselves. And I I didn't parent small children during a time when there was the perfect mom. There were no visuals of the perfect mom. There was no trade secrets for the perfect mom. We were all just kind of momming the way we did and being just as judgmental as any generation about how other women did it. However, for my generation, women started going back to work. And then the good mom, bad mom question was about, oh, you don't stay home with your children? I chose to do that. Or, oh, you only stay home with your children, you don't have a life after that. And while I'm glad that's not where we are anymore, I think that awareness that there is that way of looking at other moms as if, oh, you should have done it my way because, right? There is no my way once you allow for Enneagram wisdom. There is a way forward by doing the best you can with the personalities, yours, your partners, your spouses, and your husbands, and other people. And the children. That's what you have to work with. And so it eliminates there's a right way and a wrong way to do that. A mom on the Enneagram who is a 3 or an 8 needs to be encouraged to work outside the home if she wants to. She has the personality for it. It's where she gets her value, and she'll be a better mom for doing it. In most instances, I'm certainly not meaning to blanket talk about anything. And I can't remember not knowing the Enneagram, so I don't know how I used to think about things. I know how I felt about going back to work because I had to with children, and that being considered less than for me as a mom. I don't think that's true. And I don't think any of those artificial boundaries that we put on people fit. So the reason I love the Enneagram so much is because it explains you to you first. So you can stop asking, why did I do that? Why do I do that over and over? Why do I keep doing the same thing I don't want to do? Because of your personality. And you're going to keep doing it. So, stop giving yourself a whipping for it and figure out how you can leverage that to be to your benefit.
So good. And stop comparing yourself to other women and moms because
Absolutely.
You're not wired like them.
No.
There's a reason why you do it differently.
That's right.
And it's not because you're bad or less than.
No, it isn't. And you will feel worse and more less than. I don't think that's the thing. But if you compare, then that only gets wider and bigger. That's an unending of there's somebody who does it better than I do.
Yeah. Well, and I think it comes from, there's such a big part of that root of that comparison coming from feeling inadequate. Right. And then that is, again, selling short, like all the beauty of your Enneagram number or your strengths or all your unique gifts. Like we're focusing, talk about reframing, right? We're focusing on what we don't have versus what we do have. And when we look at that and we can say, yes, while I admire what she's doing or how she's doing it, at the end of the day, that doesn't work for me. And I just need to let that go, right. and I love that the Enneagram allows you to do that with more confidence and with that language to be like, no, there's more than one right way to do many things, and especially to mom. So I appreciate that conversation because that's so relevant.
I just want to say that it means you're different, not less than. You are uniquely different as a mom. You're not less than that mom or that mom or that mom. And in midlife, that uniqueness takes on different qualities that you haven't had the time or the energy to allow for, all of which can be really great, and all of which can assist you in working on what you're going to do with you now instead of continuing to work on your children, which, you've got kids in college. That parenting role is completely different. And it changes, like all you do is take them and drop them off, and life changes significantly forever. And that doesn't mean that you're done with anything. It means it's just a transition.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we also say so often that, and I think it applies to kids at every age, but especially as they're older, that they're going to learn the most from you by watching what you do and not by you telling them what to do. So when you are working on yourself and when you are taking these steps to understand yourself and know yourself, and they see you doing that, hopefully the even bigger end goal is for them to, pick up the same things and the same habits for themselves.
Right. And I think it's such a good idea once you understand your Enneagram number, not you took a 40-question quiz and you think you know your Enneagram number.
Thank you.
When you really know it and when you understand it, then you have an opportunity to teach your children who you are and how you see the world.
Mm.
And they get to say, wow, that's not how I see that at all.
Mm.
And then that's another new way of being in relationship that continues to grow in understanding as opposed to being stagnant.
Mm. So good.
So good to unpack right there, everything in that. I wanted to ask you, the Enneagram teaches a lot about shame and fear and anger as default emotions. And, as when you're all three of those definitely enter into motherhood at some point for most everyone. Please talk a little bit about that and what you think is relevant for us to know.
Okay. Go back to the 3 centers of intelligence and the triads. So triads came first. So 2s, 3s, and 4s, feeling, take in with feeling. 5, 6, and 7, take in with thinking. 8, 9, 1 with doing. Now, where shame, fear, and anger come in is shame is the default emotion for 2s, 3s, and 4s. Fear is the default emotion for 5, 6s, and 7s. And anger for 8s, 9s, and 1s. And my way of talking about it, because I'm a 2 on the Enneagram, but my way of talking about it, and shame is different than fear or anger. My way of talking about shame is, it's like I will be doing what I do, and then shame is waiting just off stage to come join me. And doing what I do could be cooking dinner. I'm on a stage a lot, so I'm trying to take that out of that context. And it's like a hologram. Shame just covers me. And shame, unfortunately, is about not what you do, but about who you are. When you believe as a 2, 3, or a 4 mom, because shame has been the substitute for emotions that you couldn't name, when you operate from shame, you are, I believe, unrecognizable in a healthy way to your children.
Mm.
Mm.
And the hologram is bigger than you are. And it's one thing to feel guilty, and that's about what you do. But when what you feel, if you can't come up with the right emotion, is about who you are, that gets on everybody. I think we live in a culture where I can watch my son-in-laws and daughter-in-laws, my daughter-in-law in particular, and my daughters, and I can watch them be aware, even though they're Enneagram wise and they do a good job of holding it at bay. There's a lot of shaming stuff out there about parenting and about being a mom and how you should have done it. And there's a lot of, oh, I'm so sorry to hear about, all the things. I have a lot of energy behind that, as you can probably tell. But I think if we make up our minds midlife that we're not going to judge other moms, then we'll be less sensitive to when we feel like we're being judged by other moms.
Mm.
And shame follows really closely after feeling like you're judged. Anger is the default emotion. So what that means is 2s, 3s, and 4s are feeling dominant, but that doesn't mean they've got it all together when it comes to feelings. It means that they're messy for them. And since feelings are messy for 2s, 3s, and 4s, that opens the door for shame just to come anytime it wants to. And it's hard to keep it at bay. 5s, 6s, and 7s are dealing with fear, because that's the fear triad. And fear is also the default emotion, meaning that when you're not clear or you can't clarify a feeling, then anxiety just takes its place. And so that's what you're operating from. And we live in a culture where there's fear everywhere, all day, every day, everywhere. And I think it's very difficult then to have fear be your default emotion and to have it come to you so easily in the form of anxiety. And anger also, I think anger and anxiety are falling on all of us all the time. Anger, we live in a very angry culture in a very angry time. And that makes anger look acceptable, but it's kind of not, actually. And while anger is expressed differently in 8s, 9s, and 1s, just like shame is in 2, 3, and 4, and fear in 5, 6, and 7, it still is the default emotion. And that means it substitutes for other emotions that you can't pull up at the moment or name to protect yourself from your default emotion. And I think those things are very important to work on. And I think it's very important to recognize that if your default emotion is anger and somebody else's is shame, then automatically that leaves a lot on the table that won't be addressed. And you could do that with all 3 default emotions. David White is an author that I like a lot, Whyte, and he wrote a book called Constellations. Joe and I have an altar at home. We always have. It's not weird. It sounds weird. And we have an altar at home, but we do. And it's in our prayer space, and it's really important to us. And generally in that space, we'll have a book that we're reading from together, or we have our prayer books in that space and all that. And one day I was just challenged beyond what I wanted. And I thought, I'm going to go into the prayer space today, but I'm going to get the easiest thing in there to deal with. So I picked up this book, Constellations. And the reason I thought it would be easy is because it's just maybe 2 paragraphs on a word. And there are a lot of words through the book. I don't know how many there are. And I thought, I'm going to pick a word that isn't going to just challenge my socks off today. I'm going to just kick back. So I chose maturity. I'm old. I thought, surely I've got that. So I pick up maturity and I start to read it. And David White said, maturity is being able to hold the past, the present, and the future all at the same time. And then I started thinking, what does that say about shame and fear and anger? Would it be possible if I expanded holding my shame to be able to at least name when I'm feeling fear or angry? Could that help me get to other emotions that I'm not able to name, which gives shame an open pathway to just cover me? And I'm doing that work now. I have been for about 18 months, and it helps a little.
There's something really powerful. Yeah. I think there's something really powerful I've been experiencing myself recently in understanding and holding space for other emotions instead of just your default. Because my default has always kind of been fear and then anxiety. But what I've been realizing is that what that's covering is a lot of anger. And I've never had space to deal with that because I've just lived in so much fear all the time. And here I was all this time thinking that I had to deal with all just the thoughts in my head, not realizing that I had all these emotions that I wasn't even paying attention to. So that's a really powerful thing that you just shared. Yeah.
Yeah. I hate the idea that I could be angry instead of feeling shame.
Same.
Right? I get tired of feeling shame. So I don't know. Give me a little anxiety for a minute.
Easy for you to say. You don't want
Yeah.
my anxiety.
Right.
Well, I'm in anger. I guess my triad is anger, and I've got some thinking to do on that because I'm out of touch with all three of those right now. I'm feeling
Okay, let me help you with just anger.
okay.
8 anger is straight up and then it's over. 9 anger is passive aggressive. And 1 anger is resentment because it's always turned inward first.
Yeah, and I'm a one, so that resonates.
You get
But
angry with
I
yourself
tend,
first.
and I've been in that 7 space, so I think that's where I say I'm out of touch. Is I have been healthily working on myself and been more in that 7 space, but time to tune into some of that underlying. Yeah, cool. I love this is exactly what I was hoping for. Thank you for bringing so many good nuggets there to unpack. And Brooke, I think you have a couple of quick fire questions for Suzanne.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk to you, I think, for another hour, but out of respect for your time, there's just so much wisdom here. And I just want to mention something that you had said before we started the interview that I think is so powerful, and I just want to touch on before I go to the rapid fire questions, is how important it is to connect with women and or moms, regard whatever it is, that are outside of your generation, and how we don't do that enough. And I think that's that I read that and I thought how powerful that is and what a good reminder. And honestly, some of the best advice, some of the best connecting, some of the best mentorship I've ever gotten is from women that are in a stage beyond me. And so I think that's an important thing to point out. To thank you first for all of your wisdom, because you're now a grandmother of what is it, 9?
Yes.
9 grandchildren, and lucky for you, they're all around you. That says something to you as a person and the work you've done on yourself and with them. But thank you for sharing your wisdom to us and to our community. We really appreciate it very, very much.
Sure. You're so welcome.
If you don't mind, we have just 3 rapid fire kind of fun questions to end with. And the first one is, this phase of life, any phase of life can be stressful, but there's a lot of stress that comes with sort of the overwhelmingness and transition of this phase. Can you share one of your favorite things that you like to do for stress management?
Yeah. I'm just crazy in love with my husband.
Oh.
I always have been. And being with him makes everything doable and most things wonderful.
Wow. That's amazing. That's beautiful. I'm not sure I even want to ask any other questions. I could just stop everything there.
Well, that's so relevant to, I think, the work that you've done, because I've seen that in my relationship. The more that you work on yourself, the more that you build those connections, right? Through where there are disconnects with that information that we can learn about ourselves and learn about our spouse. I think there's so many people, unfortunately, on earth who don't are walking the earth in relationships who don't know the potential of what is possible when you dig into some of these things, right? And it's so beautiful to hear that you, at 75, how many years have you been married?
40.
Yeah.
And would you say it's getting better every year?
Day. Every day.
Amazing.
Amen. It's possible. Love
Yeah.
that.
That's a lot to look forward to. Second question, what's one, and you've already given us so much already, but if you have one piece of advice that served you very well in parenting older kids or grown kids, what would that be that you could share with our audience?
They have so much to teach me. And once I, there are times when mutuality is not appropriate, but there are also times when it is. And I am amazed by them. They are dealing with raising children in the internet. I didn't have to do that. They are having to deal with, we live in a metroplex. Dallas is a huge city. Potential school shootings, and they have that figured out. They are raising vibrant, beautiful children who feel safe and who are out in the world doing what they do. Our youngest learned how to ride a bicycle this week by herself. And I've watched the video over and over and over because if you can bridge enough, often enough, to stay connected to your children in the reality of the world they live in, not in the reality of the world that you lived in as a family when they were children, that changes every conversation. And there's a power shift that comes with that too. And Joel, our oldest son, works with us full time. And I couldn't do the work I do without him, without the gifts and graces that he has. And all of our children bring us something as young adults, some entering midlife adults. And I've known that since the first one left home. And I finally figured it out that it was mirrored for me, modeled for me by my parents. So that's where I got it.
That's great.
I don't know if that's the answer that you were maybe looking for, but I think it's possible to respect a sixth grader if you recognize what space they have to live in and make life work in. And so when your children get older, you certainly can learn from them then and still have plenty to teach. And teaching is not preaching. And good teaching offers freedom of response. And so Joe and I just keep answering the questions we're asked, asking questions that we want to have answered. And interestingly enough, that we got to talk about shame, fear, and anger. Our goal when the children were little was that we would try very hard never to put any of the three on them for any reason.
Wow. That was great. I love that wisdom, meeting them and parenting them, connecting with them where they are not the life you had together when they were young. And I know that's a mistake I make very often. And I see that. I'm trying to overcome that. That's so important. It's huge, huge. Last question. Is there you should probably recommend one of your books, and we're going to recommend them here in a second. But as far as reading goes, what's a pivotal book, something you're reading right now that you love, something that was very pivotal for you, something that you could recommend to our listeners, or something you just enjoy?
Yeah, right now, the most pivotal, is that the word?
Pivotal?
Yeah, that. The most significant book I've read for where I am on my journey right now, recently, is Between Two Kingdoms. And I wouldn't want to talk right now about any other books that I'm reading because I'm reading in preparation for my new book, and I'm reading a lot about loss and loneliness and all kinds of loss and generational loss and all the things. Wow. And so I'm in a deep study right now about ambiguous loss and other kinds of loss.
Wow.
The other book that I would highly recommend, it's two actually. And the first is Ambiguous Loss by Pauline Boss. And I want to really emphasize that one because everything that affects women as strongly as midlife moms is ambiguous loss.
Mm,
When your child goes away, it's ambiguous loss.
sure.
When you have one person less at the dinner table, it's ambiguous loss. It's everywhere. Ambiguous loss is everywhere. And we just came out of a time when COVID was so big that we had ambiguous loss everywhere in relationship to that. And it wasn't named and it wasn't dealt with.
Mm.
That book is a prerequisite to the book that I think also by Pauline Boss that is even more important. And that one is The Myth of Closure.
Excellent. Thank you for those recommendations. Nothing I've heard
Sure.
of, so I'm definitely link them and look those up.
Great.
Excellent. Once again, I, on behalf of both of us, we can't thank you enough for taking time out of your very busy schedule to join us and share some of your wisdom with us. It was such a pleasure. I want everybody to recall the books that we mentioned at the start: The Road Back to You, An Enneagram Journey to Self-Discovery, The Path Between Us, An Enneagram Journey to Healthy Relationships, and then Journey Towards Wholeness. And if I remember correctly, when we chatted before we started, Suzanne, you said that a mother in this transitory phase with the kids growing up, leaving home, looking for what's next, you highly recommend The Path Between Us, correct? That was the one that has the roadmap and the step-by-step steps and things like that, correct?
Correct. And
Okay.
after you've done enough Enneagram work to know the difference in triads and stances, then the third book is the book for that.
And then the third. So I'll link all of those as well, but you can find everything that Suzanne does at her website, lifeinthetrinitymministry.com. Her Instagram handle is at Suzanne Stabile. And if you want to find her on Facebook, she's at Enneagram Suz, S-U-Z. And so I just encourage you, if you haven't read the book, The Road Back to You, I know many of you have, read it, definitely pick up The Path Between Us and check out what Suzanne's doing. I think that you're just so wise. You radiate peacefulness too. I feel so calm in your presence. I mean, it's a
Second
virtual
that.
presence, but I still feel it. And I think that you will be, however any of our audience chooses to connect with you, I think that you could be a real game changer in this phase of life. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you both for what you do. And you took on quite a challenging topic there. I think it's admirable work, and somebody needs to do it well. And I'm glad you are.
Thank you for that.
Receive. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Same back to you.
Yeah.
Very same thing.
Thank you.
Ladies, thank you so much for joining us here today again for another episode of Life After Kids. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. Make sure you're following us on all the channels: Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube if you prefer to watch. You can find all of our resources, including the book, at www.lifeafterkids.com. Have a great day, everyone.